Welcome to the Real Estate Investing Failures to Fortunes podcast, the show where we fearlessly dive into the untold stories of real estate investors' greatest setbacks and how they turned those failures into resounding successes. I'm your host, Kate Berry, and we're talking with real estate investors across the country to learn exactly how and why they failed, and how they took that failure and turned it into a powerful lesson for their business. So come along with me, Kate Berry, on this transformative journey from failure to fortune. I invite you to join our supportive community where together we can inspire, educate, and motivate each other to achieve all of our real estate investing goals. Welcome to the Real Estate Investing Failures to Fortunes podcast. I'm your host, Kate Berry. On this show, we dive deep into journeys of real estate investors and agents who have experienced failures but are willing to share the lessons learned that help them turn those failures into fortunes. We are thrilled to be here today with our guest, Sam Dolcine. Sam is a Haitian American Brooklyn native who moved to Los Angeles in 2016. Frustrated by the lack of podcasts specifically focused on Black real estate investors, he took matters into his own hands and started the Black Real Estate Dialogue in 2019. The show gained quickly a following thanks to Sam's engaging interviews with successful Black real estate investors and developers from around the country. A challenge he faced early on was not having enough money to buy his first property, which forced him to get creative and find alternative financing options. With his ingenuity and hard work, Sam has begun building his portfolio of single-family homes in the Midwest. So, Sam, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's funny, I was on a podcast yesterday and I was like, it's great to be on this side of the table because I can just show up and talk.
That's right. And just talk about yourself. And that's exactly what I want to learn all about you. How did you get started in real estate? Give us some moment of when it clicked for you.
Yes, so it clicked for me back in 2018. So at the time I was working at a school and for whatever reason, I was looking at my retirement account. Maybe I was bored. Let's say I was bored. So I saw the money that was in that particular account and it said, oh, you can project what you'll have at retirement at I think 67 and a half. I mean, I know they keep raising the retirement age, but let's say 67 and a half. And whatever the sum was the sum. And it said, what do you want to live off of? And I put what I thought was a fairly modest number. And I realized very quickly that the money was going to run out.
Wow. Fast, right?
Before I probably was going to die.
Oh.
And so I'm like, okay, I need to figure out a way to make money outside of my job. And I had heard about real estate. I didn't know anybody really doing real estate like that at a high level. And I went to the guy in town who I knew. I said, hey, I want to invest in real estate. I heard you can get a house, you can make money. Like, what am I supposed to do? He said, fill out this information. I filled the information out. He said, your debt to income ratio is too high and you don't make enough money. And so I went back into the rabbit hole of the internet and I discovered people were investing out of state. I never knew people could invest out of state. I didn't even know it was allowed. Right? And the reason for that is because when I was growing up in Brooklyn, we lived inside of a multi-unit apartment and we just lived in one of the apartments. It was like 3 or 4 units. We lived in one. The landlord also owned the one next door. He's still there. And he just lived in one of the units. So I thought that's what
right.
I thought that's what everyone did. So I went into another rabbit hole for about a year. And just fast forward to 2019, I got introduced to some folks out in Dayton, Ohio. And I identified that as the market I wanted to get started in. And I was able to buy my first out-of-state property in the fall of 2019. So from when I discovered I wanted to invest in real estate, couldn't do it locally, discovered out-of-state investing, the timeline between that was about a year, and I was in the game.
Nice. Wow. So tell us about that first deal. And tell us too, I love learning about everyone's different criteria. How did you know, okay, Dayton, Ohio is the place, and what was the deal that you found?
Yeah, absolutely. So a few things. So Dayton, Ohio for me was the place. I didn't target it, honestly. I just got introduced to folks out there. It's funny. I was looking a few weeks ago at my real estate investing Google folder when I was making notes and just everything I was learning. And I had a list of cities. Dayton wasn't on it until I heard about it. I never heard about it besides the fact that the NCAA men's basketball tournament, they have games there sometimes. I literally knew nothing about the city outside of that. And so I got introduced to some folks out there and they sent me some market reports. So they were sending me the money that's being invested into downtown, the money that's being invested into the infrastructure, the roads, bridges, bike lanes, all those kind of things. And I did my own research and I discovered they even had a downtown website where they were talking about, the hundreds of millions of dollars that have been invested, businesses that are coming, and really how they're trying to revive the city because it's in, I believe, like the Rust Belt, right? So it's very industrial history, but we all know what happened with those jobs. A lot of them got shipped overseas, right? So they're trying to bring the city back. And when I visited, I'm like, wow, okay, I can see it. I can see the vision. I can see where this thing is going. I went to this particular area where they have a minor league baseball team. So I was by that baseball park and I just saw the restaurants, I saw the breweries, things like that. And I drove around. I'm like, okay, I can see this as a place that is unsung, but it's on the cusp of something positive. So
Nice.
those are some of the indicators for me that I looked at when I was looking at a particular city. And notice I didn't give you 15 things, right? I am a data nerd. I look at a lot of different stuff. However, I didn't make my decision based on 15 factors. The city's
Right.
heading in the right direction. The price to rent ratios are good, so I can cash flow.
Yep.
And there's a high rental demand. At the time, I think it was 60% renters, 40% owners. Now it's more 50-50 based on the
Mhm.
last census.
Nice.
And it was affordable. And so I'm like, okay, that's enough for me. I met
Yeah.
some folks here. I feel comfortable. I put my feet on the ground, which is not a requirement, but for me, it made me feel better and more confident. We went from there. So as far as the deal, it was a single family home.
Mhm.
It was 90 little like a shade under 90,000. So let's say 90,000. I put 20% down. At the time I had a property manager, put a tenant in there
Mhm.
and I closed and the next month I got a rent check and I'm like or the deposit and I'm like, wow. Like I'm sitting here at this job that I don't like and someone gave me money for the roof over their head. This is amazing.
It's amazing, right? It's like magic.
Oh yeah. Unbelievable.
I really love what you said. A lot of people talk about investing out of state, and I think they kind of think of it as, okay, let's just put a bunch of numbers into a spreadsheet, plug and play, the numbers will come out, and then that works. You went there, and what you saw was, I think something that people don't really take into account is, are other people investing? Is there an energy there where you're feeling like, hey, this is a nice place to live. And look at all this, look at these restaurants busy. Or look at these, they're bringing a minor league baseball team there. Those are attractions and amenities that draw people to want to live there and also
Mhm.
to want to stay there. And
Mhm.
it kind of gives me a little bit of chills. It reminds me a lot of my town here, Brattleboro, Vermont. It's also been very depressed. It's gone through a really rough time. Everything has a cycle, but as we're trying to come up and revitalize our community, what the push is about positive messaging to get people excited about investing here and putting down roots here and bringing their money and capital here. And I love that you found that great single family pre-pandemic too. So do you still own that deal? And how's that working out for you?
I absolutely do. And we can talk. I know, I'm sure we'll talk about the failures part, but
Yes. Oh,
the
yeah. Well,
best,
I know. I like to start it off with a great,
yeah, yeah,
nice, easy, what's working. Let's talk about, yeah,
yeah,
let's talk about the failures. What
yeah.
happened next?
So I still do own that property, and I didn't mean to fast forward, but that's just like the first thing that came to mind because I made a lot of rookie mistakes on that. So
Mhm.
I'll tell you this: the best part of that property is the location. The location is extremely good. Minutes away from downtown,
Nice.
minutes away from what's called the Orient District, which is, there's a lot of bars, restaurants, and different things. So entertainment
Mhm.
and the location is great. But what I didn't realize is that, or what I overlooked is that in the inspection report, the HVAC system was flagged. I went through the inspection report pretty thoroughly and I told them like fix X, Y, and Z. For whatever reason, maybe I was nervous or scared to say something about the HVAC, that the deal wasn't going to work out. But here's what happened. A couple years later, when tenants were moving in, it went out completely. And so it got repaired a little bit, and I was able to at least get them fans around the fall because winter was about to start. And
Mhm.
I repaired it the next year, but that's one thing I didn't really know. The second thing is the fence.
Mhm.
During my first year of owning the property, the fence collapsed. It's a corner lot. So there's wood, it's a wooden fence, and on the interior of it was chain link, but it was kind of janky. And it totally collapsed. Property manager didn't bother to tell me. I happened to see a note in their monthly report. Took them forever to get it fixed,
Mm.
and the problem arose again like a couple months ago. So as we speak, it's torn down, and I have a contractor who is going to put just a 42-inch wood picket on the. It's a corner lot, so it's so imagine like a rectangle. So on the long side of it, we're going to put wood picket and call it a day.
Yeah.
But I didn't know those things as a rookie, right? I didn't know those things. However, here's the thing: I want people to get, you're going to have those moments. No matter how much experience you have, you're going to make mistakes. As you go on, what typically happens is you make fewer of certain kind of mistakes, but real estate is ever evolving and changing. So it's impossible to catch everything. As you go higher, you make less of those rookie mistakes, right? We're human. You can bounce back from anything. And so those are some of the things that happened. And also, I fired my property manager after like a year and change,
Yeah.
because when I visited there for the first time after buying the property, which was maybe a year later, I was trying to gain access to the property to just see it, right?
Yeah.
Meet the tenant, which I don't usually do, but I felt like I wanted to, just to check on the property. And they were acting like I was a nuisance. So I just pulled up and rang the bell and, met them, the property out and stuff. And how do you like the property manager, all this stuff? And a friend of mine was encouraging me, like, yo, just try to do it yourself. It's not
Yeah.
that hard, which I ended up doing and I do now. But I think there was a level of fear
Hmm.
with just telling them, hey, like, this is not working out type of thing, and it ended up being fine. So I learned a lot from that property, but rent increased exponentially over the last couple of years. I have great tenants in there. They are
Yep.
fantastic. I hope they never leave unless they buy a house. And it's going great. It's going great on that particular property.
How
And
about
I've learned a
Haitian?
lot.
I'm assuming you must have had some pretty good appreciation being buying it post-COVID.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Because I bought it in 2019, and we all know everything has run up since then. So yeah, homes have sold for way more.
Nice.
Similar homes, similar square foot layout have sold for way more. I'm sure I have a good amount of equity in it. So all things considered, I'll take the lumps. I'm looking at it long term. And it's just lessons. It's just lessons that you learn and you
I
carry
want to
forward.
I want to ask you, how did you deal with these unforeseen capital expenditures? I mean, when you
Yeah.
have a single family rental, it's a little bit different than when you've got 4 or 5 rental units, right?
Yeah.
Where you maybe have a little bit more you can put aside for these events. So how did you deal with that?
Yeah. So how I dealt with it was I didn't use the money. So like any cash flow that I got, I just saved it. I didn't spend it on myself. And, you know, people look at real estate and they think about all the money they're going to make, but they don't think about saving for a rainy day. Like the same way we save for a rainy day from our working income, like whatever we do for work or our business or whatever, you have to look at the rental property the same way, because a day will come, like a rainy day will come. Like you'll have a vacancy, you'll have an unexpected repair, and so on and so forth. So the great thing is I didn't have to use any of my own money. I didn't use any of my own money until I had my first vacancy. And there was quite a lot of work that needed to be done. And I ended up exhausting all of the funds I had saved from the rental income, but the majority of it did not come from my working income. For
That's
me, it's important to just save that money, especially when you're just starting out. You don't want to take money out of the pot. You want to let it build up for your reserves. And a day is going to come where you can have a portion of the cash flow to pay yourself. But I don't think people should go in thinking that right off the bat. You want to
not a
stabilize
perfect
things
deal.
and
That's
and,
right.
and
No.
scale.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's so many different ways we can calculate cash flow. If you're just focusing on that month to month, this month is, and it's just rent minus mortgage, minus property management, minus other fixed costs. What about those variable costs? What about the thing that you can't control? We're talking about a physical asset, and houses are there's a million components to a property. And not to mention, there's just acts of God. Things can have bad tenants, anything can happen. So I love that you had the mindset to save right away. I think, do you sometimes wonder, like, what would you have done or what would have happened if you didn't have that savings? And a lot of people come up to that moment of, oh my gosh, $20,000, $30,000 repair, don't have anything left. I mean, do you think about that, or how's your mindset about versus how you started versus now?
Yeah, so I think my mindset at the time actually benefited me because naturally I'm a saver. And even though back then I wasn't making much money, like I was saving a good amount of money, right? So when I bought the house, my closing costs, down payment, all that other stuff, I still had money on the side, like for my own stuff, my day to day. So I didn't put all of my money into the property, which is something I do not recommend to people. You need to have reserves for yourself and your
Right.
household, reserves for the property, in addition to the down payment and closing costs. A lot of times online, people will talk about the cash flow. People will say, if you have the down payment closing costs, you're good, buy the property. But what if something happens, right? So for me, I prefer people to be safer than sorry, because what happens sometimes, or what can easily happen, is let's say you put all of your money towards the property, something goes wrong, you don't have any money left. So you are putting things on credit cards that you can't pay off in a reasonable amount of time. That could easily cause somebody to give up on real estate altogether because they didn't go into it correctly. Like they went into it pinching pennies together and not having enough reserves for when things happen. So, I think my mentality at the beginning helped, I would say. Just like when the money ran out from the rental, when I had the first vacancy, was I upset? Of course. But I had the money to pay for it. And
It didn't
so,
knock you out.
exactly, it didn't
Knock you
knock
out of
me
the
out.
game.
And I don't think people should be in a position where something's going to knock you out, because it could very easily put you out the game, which I would understand, like somebody being disillusioned, but you can avoid that. And it might take longer. And if it takes longer for you to get started in something that can benefit the rest of your life, in my opinion, it's worth it.
That's right. So how did that first deal shape where you are today? Tell us a little bit more about your investment career since then.
Yeah, absolutely. So I took some time just to figure, as you can hear, a lot was going on with that first property. So the first few years, I just spent time just trying to figure it all out and get things together. Right. And in 2023, I actually got to give a shout out to my wife. In 2022, she's like, "Hey, when are you buying another property?" And I said, "Oh, I can start looking." And the great part about that is, as we know, interest rates has started to increase. And what I noticed was people running away from real estate, well capitalized people walking away from real estate or stay on the sidelines because they thought prices were going to go down. They thought the interest rates were going to go down. Obviously, they haven't. And so I'm okay. I'm like, okay, in theory, at least, there should be less competition.
Yes.
Sellers should be more willing, in theory, to be flexible on certain things. Let's get back out there. And so was looking for a few months, had a couple deals under contract, backed out because they were just going to be money pits. And I ended up closing on another property at the beginning of last year. It's actually vacant now as of last week. So I'm going through the turnover process
Okay.
and getting it ready to go back on the market.
Yep.
But I don't even remember my interest rate. And the reason I say that is because it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Seven something, the interest rate literally doesn't matter. Did you buy it at a price such that there will be cash flow that's sufficient for what you're looking for?
Mhm.
If you're someone who likes to buy with equity, did you buy at a price such that there's enough equity and cash flow in it for you, regardless of the interest rate? The interest rate could be 10%. If it meets those requirements, it doesn't matter. So I bought that property and I did a lot better with knowing what was needed ahead of time. I had to put some money into it. I had to put hot water tank in there, had to fix some windows, had to put some blinds in, small stuff, nothing,
Yeah.
nothing too crazy.
Yeah.
But again, I had the money for it, right? So I knew ahead of time, I'm gonna have to put some level of money into this, and got somebody in there, and it was rolling. And
Nice.
hopefully, over the next couple of weeks, I can do what needs to get done
Yep.
and get it back on the market again. And I'm looking to continue growing my portfolio. I'm always looking at what's out there and looking for new opportunities. And again, I'm looking at the long game, right? Looking at the long game and just continuing to build my portfolio out there and not listen to what the media is saying. Because what the media
Yeah.
is saying is it's the worst time to buy.
They're
It's the
always
best
saying
time to
that, aren't
buy.
they?
Yeah, it's the best time to buy. It's a great time to buy all the time, depending on your situation, period.
And I'm assuming too, the interest rate you got was a fixed rate.
Yes. Yes. Fixed rate.
I think that's a very key point. We talk about fixed costs versus variable costs, control what you can control. And what I'm hearing you say is about the second deal, and what I'm hearing and noticing in your voice is a lot of confidence and not a lot of fears. To me, would you agree maybe that fear is not as much as that first deal?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I believe the where that confidence comes from is I have support. I have a support system out there. So I have another investor who helps me out
Right.
tremendously. So she does like my walk. She did the walkthrough with the tenants last week. She got me pictures and videos of just what needs to get done. She's actually going back over there in a few days to plug up the Wi-Fi because I'll be getting cameras and a digital lock. I'm trying to make some changes over there. And I just pay her for her time and she sets things up.
Yeah.
And I think that has helped with the fear. And then also, like, what's the worst case scenario, right? To me, there's not a worst case scenario. What's the worst that could actually happen? This is real estate, it's a property. If I'm doing things lawfully, I have my lawyer make sure I'm doing things properly, look over the leases and all that stuff. And
Yep.
you hope for the best, right? You vet as best as you can and you hope for the best, right? And so I don't see a worst case scenario. I've been through worse in life than a rental property and something going wrong. It's stressful. It is difficult. Like the turnover
Sure.
process, it is difficult, but once it's done, it's done. You get somebody good in there and hopefully they remain good and reflect what you saw during the process. And then you sit back and make money.
Yeah. And is this deal also in Dayton, Ohio?
Yes. Yes. So
Oh,
it's
very nice.
about, I'm not sure how far it is. Maybe it's like 10, let's say 15 minutes from the first property. So it is a little bit north of
Hmm.
the downtown, whereas the other one is a little bit east on
Hmm.
the east of downtown. So it's like a little bit north of downtown and it's located very strategically. So there's a corridor over there that there are plans to redevelop and add businesses and things like that. So there is some cool things coming to the area and there's some good plans for the area. So when I was looking, and what I usually do is if I'm looking at a property, I'm like, okay, like what is the plan for this general area? Like what is coming potentially down the pipeline, or what is being proposed, or what are the rumors, or what have you.
Yep.
And it's easy to find that stuff. When cities are doing these type of things, they want everyone to know
They
about
do.
it. So I look at that. I look at that. I try to go to areas where people will be comfortable living. It doesn't matter if I would be, but if people will be comfortable living, and the person who helps me out there, Courtney, like I have her drive the areas too. I'm like, hey, I saw a house in this area, or I saw a couple of properties in this area. Could you take a spin for me? And the city's small. She can get anywhere pretty quickly. Send me pictures, videos. She's like, I saw this around here, this around here. So sometimes even before I even look at a property, I'm like, hey, drive this area for me real quick. And that helps. So like the last property, she drove the area. She gave me the 411 on how things are looking and what's going on around there on that block and all that stuff, right? You do all those things and it helps you feel more comfortable with your decision. So if you don't know someone and you want to invest out of state, you can find somebody on like TaskRabbit or something like that, Thumbtack maybe, who can just go in and do that for you really quick. Take a picture, take a video of a
Yeah.
certain area. So there's ways to get it done through other people if you're not local to the area you want to invest in.
That's great. Going back to what you were saying about the first property manager you work with, because what I'm hearing is having your team, the right support, the right people in place. It's actually quite critical to the success of a deal or an investment. And so you've got Courtney now, and it sounds like you parted ways with that other property management company. I think it's really important to make that note that if someone on the team and your support is not delivering the way that you need them to, it is okay to revisit that and to have those tough conversations, because not having the right people in place, the person, like you said, she's down there doing the due diligence, in there, getting you what you need, really showcase what needs to be done. You're feeling like connected, you're able to move faster, more efficiently, you're more aligned. And if you had any advice for someone looking to do what you're doing, or if you could talk to yourself or your past self in that first deal, what would be the most important piece of advice you'd give them?
So the first thing would be don't be afraid to ask questions. And when I look back on my first experience, I had a long remedy list based on the inspection. And I still can't tell you why I didn't flag the HVAC situation. I don't know if I missed it. I don't know if I was too timid to ask about it. Maybe I thought it would be too big to ask about,
Mm-hmm.
but don't be afraid to ask questions. Like the worst No, there's nothing wrong with the word no.
That's right.
If you hear that answer, you hear the word no or yes, and you can make your decision accordingly. So I would say don't be afraid to ask questions. And even during that first experience, like all the stakeholders, I asked a bunch of questions, right? And I still do to this day. I'll call my inspector, like, hey, can you explain to me on the inspection? I saw X, Y, and Z. Like, what do you think roughly this could cost? Do you think this is bad? Like, what are the downsides? Don't be afraid to ask questions, especially to people to whom you're giving money, right?
Yeah.
So that's the first thing I'll say. Don't be afraid to ask questions. The second thing is do enough to get to the finish line. Don't worry about knowing every single little thing. You're going to miss something. Just accept it. You're going to miss something. Try not to miss the big important things. So you
Yeah.
want to make sure obviously the house is structurally sound, which will come up in the inspection report. You want to make sure like the big things are cool, right?
Yeah.
But, if there's a blind that's broken, that's a small thing. So worry about the big things and don't be afraid. I was having a conversation with someone the other day, and it was honestly kind of sad, right? This is an individual who is capitalized, well capitalized. She has the money to invest in real estate. She cannot get over the fear. Can't tell you how many people I speak to who cannot get over the fear. They have the money, but they have a fear of taking even the next step in the process. I'm not even talking about the fear of being a landlord. I'm talking about fear of taking the next step in the process, right?
Yeah.
So I would say don't be afraid and don't doubt yourself. I mentioned earlier, I believe, my parents, we lost our home when I was a kid. I don't know if I mentioned that.
No, you didn't. Oh
Yeah,
my
we lost
gosh.
our home when I was a kid.
Wow.
And I'll never forget that day leaving the block and leaving my friends. My parents, unfortunately, have been renting since then, and they're
Yeah.
in the same apartment that I was talking to you about earlier, right? And so I could have easily been the person to say, you know what? My family lost our
Yep.
home.
You're
I
risky.
can't, yeah, I can't do it. That means I can't do it.
That's hard to
But
get over. I mean, that's like
it
a
is.
real trauma that you're experiencing at a young age.
It
That can
is.
be very impactful.
It is. I agree 100%. And what I decided to do is use it as motivations for why I could do it and why I could turn things around for the family. So those are the things that I would say. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Focus on the big things within the property and don't worry about the small stuff. You're going to miss something. Just try not to miss the big things. And three, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid and believe in yourself. Believe that you can learn and grow from the mistakes you're going to make, right? You can study as much as you want. You're going to make some mistakes and it's okay.
It is okay.
Just make sure you're staying within the law. Make sure you're treating tenants properly or your team members, whoever is managing everything properly, and you'll be okay. You can always bounce back and there's always an answer and a way out.
That's right. And save, save
Yes.
money, put money aside, especially when it's good. I think when it's really good, money's flowing, everything seems easy. That's when you want to spend it. And then you start saving when everything feels tight. It's like, gotta have kind of the opposite,
Hmm.
save all the time, especially on your first deal, especially if you're dealing with single family, so that when the thing, because it's inevitable, right? A house, things break, things happen. So if you've set yourself up from the beginning, you can shoulder that a little bit better. Because if you can get through that, again, it does take away the fear once you've had a failure. It's beautiful, that gift that happens to you in a way, because suddenly you're like, wow, actually, I no longer fear being broke. I no longer fear being poor. I've been through it. I already lived through it. It's not the worst thing that can happen to you. You can
Yeah.
always come back from it. It's stronger than before. So, Sam, I'd love to hear about, you just closed on that in your next deal. Is your plan to focus on single family in that Dayton, Ohio area going forward, or what are your longer term goals?
Yeah, yeah. So I love all kinds of real estate, right? And so I like single family homes because what I've found is, for example, tenants at the first property, they've been there for 3 years. Unless something crazy happens, they'll probably resign again in the fall.
Hmm.
The folks who moved out, I had a feeling they would only stay a year. They ended up buying a house, young couple,
Hmm.
fresh out of school. I've had a feeling they would last a year at least. And based on the tenants, I'm like, you know what? Whatever. Let's just go with them. They're fine. And they paid on time. I didn't really have any issues. So my long-term goal, I want to continue to buy single family homes in that particular market. something that I've been thinking about is self-storage facilities. I know of a couple of folks who are into that. So that's something, I don't know, at some point in the future, I would be potentially interested in because it sounds cool to me, right? Because you don't deal with tenants, you can get other people to manage it for you.
Yep.
Well, honestly, probably barely go there. How many people have storages that they haven't been to in months, right? I mean, how many people even open their garage? So I think that could be something cool to get into eventually. But yeah, I want to just continue to grow and have a long-term view. So, over time, I want to keep buying properties, keep building cash flow. And I was telling somebody this yesterday, you know, real estate, the beauty of it is it gives you options, right? It gives you
Yes.
cash
Oh,
flow, you
I
build
say that all
equity,
the time.
and over the long term, you'll have assets and you can do whatever you want. So I'm just planning to continue to grow steadily over time. And who knows, maybe I'll get into some different types of real estate. But yeah, self storage is something that sounds interesting to me. I just saw
Yeah.
someone
I love
post.
that approach. Once you've gotten through your first two, I think the first one is absolutely the hardest. You
Yeah.
learn 90% of the lessons you need to be successful. And then then it really does become fun after you
Yeah.
get two, three, four, but maybe another failure will happen down the road.
Yeah.
Lessons learned, but that's just kind of life, right? Especially when I think of us, I think of real estate investors as entrepreneurs, and you're building a business around kind of doing something that a lot of people are afraid to do. But if you can connect with people like you who are doing it, have done it, have stories to share, you have your podcast, which I love that you're out there talking to other people about how to do this. And that's kind of where we are at the end of our show now is, how do people reach out to you and how can they learn more about you?
Yeah. So you can reach me at Black Real Estate Dialogue pretty much anywhere. I'm pretty active on Instagram. We're also on TikTok, very, very active on YouTube,
Nice.
Facebook. We're on Facebook too. And blackrealestatedialogue.com is where you can find pretty much everything, all the information, all the resources. If you want to check out the show on the audio side, you can check it out on Apple. You can check it out on Spotify. And then, of course, the video versions on YouTube. And for my show, it's a mix of interviewing Black real estate investors, developers, but also I cover a lot of like housing market news, like creative ways to invest and just real estate in the housing market in general. So the interesting thing is like my mission initially was to share the stories of the Black community who are doing things in real estate for everyone to enjoy, right? So the beauty of it is we have all races and backgrounds of people who enjoy the information. I mean, that's what it's intended for, right? Like real estate, the information itself is universal. We're just telling it from our perspective. So it's a lot of fun and there's always a lot of content going out on all platforms. So hopefully the listeners are able to check it out and get some value out of it.
Absolutely. I say this all the time with real estate, and people that know how to do it or can share principles and strategies, the better it's going to make the general market. We're going to have more healthy markets. We're going to have more healthy business. You want to do deals with people that are really good at what they do, because then you're guaranteed success for both sides. And I truly believe in an abundance mindset. Like there is more than enough for everyone to be successful at this. It's not, I need to do better and then no one else can. It's actually the complete opposite. So I love that message. And all this information for more to find out about Sam is going to be in our show notes. So please go check out his podcast and YouTube channel and connect. And Sam, thank you so much for joining us today. And I hope you come on the show again.
Oh yeah, I'd love to come back whenever you'd like to have me, and I could talk real estate all day, so we can talk
Same,
about.
right? I love it. It's like an obsession. Once it clicks, it's hard to get rid of that love for real estate.
Definitely. I agree 100%.
Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you for listening. This is the Failures to Fortunes podcast. I'm your host, Kate Berry, and we will see you next time.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of Real Estate Investing Failures to Fortunes podcast. If you enjoyed today's stories and insights, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. Your feedback means the world to us. Remember, your journey in real estate is a marathon, not a sprint. Embrace the failures, learn from them, and turn them into your stepping stones to success. I'm Kate Berry, and until next time, keep hustling, stay inspired, and keep turning those failures into fortunes. Happy investing.